you're either born native or you're not. And I used to say to the people on the commission, your ancestors either came over on the boat or greeted the boat. We all go back to the original rolls that were written in 1792. The Webster-Dudley Indians, the first U.S. Census. And we go back there. We've also got documents that it would be my great aunt and grandfather and grandmother, they had to sign over. They were given sponsors, and those sponsors got $61.65, and they had to give up everything. And then one of my great aunt's diary said, I gave up my brown dress and my eating utensils so I could live on the poor farm. So how do you maintain any kind of identity to be proud of if they take away your fork and your spoon and your dress?
When I was 10 years old, I didn't know I was a Nipmuck because it was hell being Indian, and my mother wouldn't tell us that we were Indians until later in life, and then we found out. When I first found out I was an Indian, I was in Marlborough, Mass. At school. And that's when my mother first brought it up to us that we were Indian and my father was French. It never was a cool thing to be a Nipmuck or any other kind of Indian because they didn't like them. They used to call us the N-word. In school and outside of school, we had a tough time in schools. There was 5 of us that did pass and 5 that well, they couldn't pass because they were, like my mother's color. And they had it, worse than we did. But my brother Charles used to always fight with everybody. They would call us names, They would call us names and he would fight them. He was good like that. And he was only a little kid. I was really light, white, like my father's side of the family. There was 5 of us like that, and there was 5 darker ones like my mother. Everybody saw us, so they knew that, I don't know what they thought, but they thought my mother was a black woman, So they would call us names and stuff, and that, I don't know, I don't like to think about that. It was bad. They had a bad time back then. It wasn't no fun at all.
I never realized that we were really different. We are different. I had no idea, and I went to hairdressing school. And I was being trained to cut hair and to do nails, and my teacher asked me if I wanted to do this woman's hair, so I took the challenge. And as I was approaching her, she said, "Oh, I don't want the colored girl to touch me." And I looked at her, I was amazed. I looked back, I wanted to know who the colored girl was. I didn't know what she meant. And I realized I'm a person of color, and I love that.
We have council members that were taken from their homes and put in foster homes to get the Indian out of them. I can tell you from a personal experience that we were home one afternoon and some people from the state came and told my father and mother that they were taking their children because they heard that they weren't being brought up correctly. But my dad, being who he was and being a big, strong Indian chief at the time, had quite a temper. He challenged them.
Well, I was at work and my wife was home with the kids. The kids were in school, and these 2 people came to the house, and they said somebody told them my wife wasn't taking care of the kids, and I wasn't bringing home food for the kids. And they were at the house. My wife called me up, so I went right home, and they were still there. So they said, we understand that you don't feed your kids properly, this and that. So I went out to the freezer, and I opened up the freezer, and there was all kind of meat in there. I said, my wife had some chicken legs out to fry for their lunch when they come home. I said, are your kids going to have that? Have you got that in your freezer? Are your kids going to have chicken legs and French fried potatoes when they get home for lunch? Or are you going to hold that off till supper or another day? I said, get out of here and don't bother me. So they left, and they never bothered me after that.
They were not able to take us from our home, but unfortunately some of our people were taken. Rainmaker's family was taken, and one of the elders, Little Crow, and his brothers and sisters were taken. And they were put into foster homes, non-native foster homes. Another way of just completely getting rid of the Indian culture. They tried to make us white.
I had a brother, and he was older than I was, and of course he went to school before me, and it was very hard for him. He was always getting into fights because he'd stand up for himself. He would not go along with being what somebody said he was. He was kicked out of school in the 8th grade because they said he couldn't get along with anybody. He was a menace to society, and so they sent him to a boys' school, reform school. And my brother and I was very close, as brothers are. And when they sent him away, it was in a few towns over. And we missed him. We didn't have a car, we didn't have a phone. My dad and mom were separated, and we lived with my father. And when he got a few extra dollars, he would ask one of our neighbors to give us a ride up to see him. So we wouldn't see him every week, maybe once or twice a month. Or even less than that, maybe once a month. But while he was there, the same thing, he would get into these fights and get beat up, and he'd run away, and he'd walk all the way home from Barry to Sturbridge. We're talking 14, 15 years old, boy now. Oh, it's got to be 15, 20 miles or more. So this went on till he was, and he would even get beat up by the administrators there. And of course this tore my father died apart, and my uncle who was living with us at the time. When we turned 17, they took him out of school, and he says he had to join the service or go to jail, one or the other. So again, they took him away. We joined the Air Force, and when he got through his boot training, they sent him out to the Azores Islands. And they finally broke him there. They made him join the APs, Air Police. He loved animals, of course, and we all do. They made him shoot dogs on the runways, and he used to send them up plane crashes that used to the Azores Islands and mountains. To send them up there to get the bodies. So they finally broke him. He went Bento. So they gave him a medical discharge. But he came home, he was a wild man. Drinking and fighting. But then it was like a miracle. He turned to the ways of his ancestors. Like that. Became the leader of our tribe. He died when he was 55. But in a short time, he was a well-known leader. At his funeral, there was an Apache chief that came all the way to be there because he heard about him. We had a powwow in one of our powwows in land we rented in Brimfield. And a Sioux chief came to visit him. So this is a man that the way he grew up. And we created, saw something special in him. And showed him the red road. And he died so young, he's gone again. He was very close to my brother. I would say closer than my father, you know. Brothers grow up. He was always protecting me. It was that was a real hard time for me when I was away from him so often. But now, since he's moved on, we know he's with us. Well, last year's Nipmuck powwow, we had it at a place we call Lake Syog, which is very historic in Nipmucks. And he's always wanted to build a Nipmuck village there where all the Nipmucks or all the surrounding tribes could come and get together and have big powwows and sweats. But he died before it ever came to fruition. So having that powwow there last year was, here we are. He brought us here and we're here now.
Growing up as a child, when I was younger, I had to fight a lot because people would come up and go woo woo woo, call me Geronimo, Chief Sitting Bull, just a lot of names. So I had to fight a lot to have people respect me. Back in my younger days, there were Indians who didn't want to be Indians because due to people with name calling and the color of the skin, so some people try to pass off as not being an Indian. My parents and my grandparents had to hide their heritage. I don't do that. I never have, and I'm proud of what I am. But my parents had it rough, and my grandparents. Due to being an Indian, they hid it all. Well, not exactly hid it all, but they had to hide a lot of it.
Our ancestors, the records showed the first U.S. census taken, 1792, the Dudley Indian tribe, they were all written down as Nipmuck Indians. And as time went on, their heritage was taken, their culture was taken, and they were written down as black or Caucasian, mixed, or nothing at all. My son, Richard Snow Elk, was born a Nipmuck Indian. By the time he was 7, he turned Caucasian, according to documents, hospital records. It was changed. His whole culture was taken from him with the hit of the computer, and they put him down as Caucasian. But I did dispute it and won that argument. Another example was my great-uncle Payne Henry's. He was well known as a Nipmuck Indian. He lived by the barter system until the day he died. And the day he died, the newspapers put his obituary up, and the headline reads, Payne Henry's, last of the Nipmuck Indians. The irony of it is, it reads, he leaves so many nieces, nephews, and children. This was just another example of trying to annihilate the Nipmuck tribe by saying he was the last of the Nipmuck Indians, when in fact he had many descendants.